What up, everyone? This is the Twice Over Film Club, and I'm your host, Faraz. Today we are discussing The Father. As you know from our preview, we really liked this film and wanted this to be the winner for Best Picture at the Academy Awards. But unfortunately, it wasn't. I think you will understand exactly why we really love this movie after listening to this episode. Remember, we have now done all the Best Picture nominees, so give them all a listen and follow us at the Twice Over on all the socials to keep up with our watch list. We'll be getting back to doing movies that we selected for one another next week. Alright, it's me, Fahad, and Yusuf for this episode. Alright, Fahad and Yusuf, we're back. Or are we back, or did we ever leave? Are we in the same room? Does something look different?
Who are we? When are we? That is the question.
Let me check my watch. Oh wait, I don't have a watch. Did you take my watch? do you have a receipt for that watch you're wearing? Let me see it.
Fahad, I think it's inside your podcast mic where you keep all your valuables.
Well, let me check right there. Hang on.
Nope,
not there. Yusuf, you must have stolen it.
We're laughing now, but
yeah.
That was really sad. I mean, just that alone. I mean, we need to talk a lot about this movie, but you know.
And you know what? I made the worst mistake of watching it in the morning, and it just effed up the rest of my day.
Oh, jeez, that's tragic. I mean, you know, something about this movie. I think you could watch it at different points in the day, and it would give you totally different vibe. I watched it at night, and I was creeped out in a way that. You know, there is like, especially not knowing anything coming into this movie, and I was serious when I said earlier I thought it was like about like, you know, British patriarchy or something, because if you from the pace and the mood of like the intro scene of this movie with just like Olivia Coleman, you know, strutting down the street, you know, if you look at the name of the movie, the opera music that was playing, like I really could have been fooled into thinking it's just about like English family politics. So like there was a moment where like, you know, suddenly there's like a door that slams, right? And that's the first moment where, you know, Anthony's like, wait, what's going on here, right? And I really like felt like it was a horror movie. And like, I think that, you know, that pervaded throughout the movie for me. Like I felt creeped out, even knowing that that's not what was going on. I was continuously kind of like creeped out in this eerie way. So, I mean, they just, yeah, like you said earlier in the preview, just they did a really good balancing act between a few different genres that they were like towing the line of. So I enjoyed that. I enjoyed kind of the way that they played with that.
And it had your favorite thing. Maybe not exactly your favorite thing, but kind of your favorite thing in
what is my
unreliable narrator.
Yeah.
Yes. The unreliable narrator. Yeah, this is like the classic example of that, right? And usually when we talk about it, it's kind of like a little bit couched, and I'll tell you even, right, I'm typically stretching because I'm just trying to broaden kind of to a new interpretation of the movie, right? And so you can kind of bring in that element as like, you know, what do you trust? But here it's all about what can you trust out of everything that you probably can't trust? Is there anything that you can cling to as, you know, definitely reality or definitely true? So yeah, there is a lot to play with here.
So I didn't, I don't know what, in 10 minutes, right? I started noticing things and I was questioning myself because, again, I didn't know anything about the movie. And I was like, did I miss something? Did something happen here? Was I zoned out?
Yeah.
Like, I noticed like the changes in color, some furniture changes. And I had no idea like what was going on. And then I didn't realize that this movie was going to be a mind-bending movie. And then obviously once it hit me, like, oh my God, we're in the headspace of Anthony here.
Right.
So that's why we aren't sure about what we're seeing. Like, where are we? What time is it? Who is who? Like, who's Anne? Who's Paul? Yeah, man, I was not prepared for all that. And once like it started clicking, like what's going on, I was so impressed and amazed. I was like, wow, this movie got me, and it got me good. You know, like that was.
Mm-hmm. And it's not a twist that comes late. It's a twist that comes early. It's like the subtle repetition of the dialogue, and then you kind of question yourself, but then the film does that same technique over again with less subtlety, and then you catch on
and that's what impressed me a little bit, because the twist comes early, yet they continue to dole it out at you in a way that like doesn't lose your attention for up until the end, basically, right? Like even though it's not as if though they're hiding the ball and then eventually they show you where it is, right? They tell you, I mean, in pretty much plain terms, that like, look, you know, this guy's having a few episodes, you know, he's having mental issues in terms of, well, memory issues, I should say, more than mental issues. and so you know that, and yet it was still just so captivating to see him struggling to piece things together and the way that his reality shifts. So I mean, that's just that's a testament to the complete work, really. You can't even just say it's the cinematography or it's the narrative or the writing. It's everything coming together in the perfect way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm gonna defend my narrative score because I'm lower than you guys. I just want to say it's mainly because the story itself, not much is happening. Like we've already discussed the story in like its full terms right now. In the preview even. So like that's the only reason I went low. I just waited a little more for the direction in the writing and the acting and like the themes. Obviously, considering I give it 100. But yeah, it's not to say that the story was bad or anything. That's all.
Yeah, I think you could argue that the story is quite simple. If you were to break this down into like its bare bones, and I think this is difficult to do for a movie like this, to actually give an account of what happened from start to finish, it's almost impossible. But you could argue that there's like three main events or like 3 days of his life, of Anthony's life, that we see, and then we see those things play out and then blur into each other in different ways. You could potentially argue that there's a day where he gets in a fight with his caretaker and his daughter tries to convince him that we need to figure out your arrangement. Then there's a day somewhere where he's staying with his daughter in her home, and there's a few incidents there, and then there's a day where he kind of starts realizing what his reality is, and he's actually in a nursing home. You could make that argument, and I will give that as a brief summary of this film because it's so hard to do it otherwise. But I think that's why I scored it up also, because there is different ways you can take these same puzzle pieces and fit them together and tell yourself one story of what's happened in his life and what's happened with Annie. And then you could deconstruct and put it together another way. And there's a plausible argument that either one is correct, or either one is incorrect, and really there's no way to argue against it. So I think that's what I liked about this film in terms of complexity, with a few pieces just being reused or reshaped.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess we kind of talked about the acting. There's not much I need to say on it. We thought it was great, right? Anthony Hopkins just kills it in this role. Olivia Coleman was brilliant in this role as well. I mean, she's playing this daughter that's like very concerned about her father's condition, and at the same time she is realizing the cost of it, right? And we're seeing her like come to that realization. Her relationship with Paul. We have that one scene where she's like preparing dinner and she's looking out and she sees like a young couple like enjoying themselves, like laughing in a conversation, and she's probably thinking to herself like, I could have that, but I need to take care of my father. The conversations that we have between Paul and Anne are like they're very striking. Now, this is one thing I didn't. Maybe you guys can clarify for me.
Mm-hmm.
I assumed, I made the assumption that if Anthony was not on screen and it was just like Anne, or Anne and the doctor, or Anne and Paul, that those were pure reality. Whereas if Anthony was in the screen, it was from his perspective. Therefore, it wasn't, like you said, it's not really reliable. You're not sure exactly what happened when.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that, until I possibly see any counterexamples.
One scene that comes to mind is like, why did Anne, like she chokes her father in the bed?
Oh, she imagines it. She
imagines that. Okay.
Yeah, I think that one she very clearly imagined, because like they show right after that, like she's like spacing out. She's like, "Huh, what's going on?" And it's it's a little bit cheeky that they put that into their, they insert that when there's already so much confusion about what's real and what's not. But yeah, I think you could say fairly certainly by the end of it that okay, she's just kind of she's daydreaming a bit, in a kind of horrific fashion.
You know what? There's also the possibility that because Anthony is confusing his daughter with his caretaker in the nursing home, that it's him thinking about an episode involving elder abuse.
Yeah, I wasn't like again because Anthony was in the scene. That's the only reason I was like maybe this is Anthony's dream or
A
something.
memory conflated with like
Yeah,
an
because we have
image with
another
his
dream of
daughter.
his, right, where
Yeah.
he dreams that he's seeing Laura in the hospital.
Right. Right.
And that was, I think that was pretty clear that that was a dream because the next morning he tries to go to like that same closet door and it's just a closet and not the hospital. But there's little scenes like that going back and forth that I was just left a little confused. But again, in the overall sense of the movie, like you know what by that point in the movie, you know what you're in, and
Mm-hmm.
I guess the point was not to make sense of it, but to understand like why they would think like this or why this kind of event would come across someone's mind. I think I'm okay with thinking that Olivia was daydreaming and maybe thinking I'm gonna put him out of his misery, as she, because I think that was like after the dinner, right? Like after the dinner where she probably thinks her father
Mm-hmm.
heard her
Yeah.
and Paul talking about putting him in the home.
I mean, it's funny though to discuss it's before this or before that. Like, really, we have no idea what happened when, right?
Yeah.
Because we don't know when that dinner was, and I mean, it could have been right before. It could have been just a memory that he was having that kind of got interspersed, and it's this whole mess of things. This is a movie that I think I don't know. Somehow, I think there's other movies which if they jumped around this much, you would walk out of it like, man, that was just too much going on. I don't really know, what happened from start to finish. Christopher Nolan needs to clean up his act. You might say that, right? But in a movie like this, where once you understand that the viewpoint is very fragmented, I don't think I was uncomfortable by that fact, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it was really difficult to see him struggling in that way, of course, right? But you understood that that was part of what you were supposed to be absorbing. So I wasn't so concerned with trying to figure out, wait, what just happened and when, where did he come from? There wasn't that like level of kind of, anxiety kind of trying to figure out what's happening in this film, right? So I think I was more comfortable with that level of uncertainty than you would be in a typical film, and they prime you for that early on, which was a good decision because that lets you kind of settle in and just process each fragment on its own. So I think that was
Yeah.
well done by them.
I think that's an excellent point, especially about the part that they prime you early on, because with the pace and everything, right? You don't expect the movie to take that turn where you're not able to rely on any of the details.
I was gonna they definitely make sure that you understand there's gonna be some like cyclic storytelling here, right? Because the first instance we see is him wondering where his watch is, right? And he's like, "Where's my watch? I need to find my watch. I think the caretaker stole it." Or whatever, right? That's like in the opening scene. So I think like the second or third time that he mentions like, where the hell is my watch? By then you're like, okay, wait a minute. Like I think he's reliving some things and things keep coming up, and then later the whole idea of like having chicken for dinner, it comes up like 10 times.
Yeah.
And so then you start realizing like, okay, hold on, like
It's the same day.
right, it's the same day, or he's misplacing the events or whatever's going on, right? But then you start realizing that everything is actually coming back to like kind of the same core events. So yeah, I think inserting the whole dialogue about the watch early on, that really
Mm-hmm.
gave a good cue to you as a viewer as to like what frame of mind you should be in.
Yeah, and early on is that first scene pretty much with Anne and her father where she tells him that she's gonna be moving to Paris, and we hear him repeat like I don't know 8 times in the film, like Paris. They don't even speak English over there.
Yeah, yeah.
And but this that part was a little confusing because we have enough scenes with Anne in it saying, "What? I'm not going to Paris." So we can assume that scene would have happened, before that first scene that we see in the movie where she does tell him that she's going to Paris. I don't know, like, so there's definitely a lot of like she tells him that I'm not going to Paris when they're at the doctor's. So I don't know what day that was that he would have gone to the doctor's. Maybe that would have been when he was initially diagnosed. I don't know, but like there was like some scenes that were confusing me. I didn't put too much into it. I got the point that I was supposed to from it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but if you were trying to like piece it together, like we've been saying, it's not meant to be pieced together again because we're getting it from the perspective of someone suffering from dementia, and it's impossible to piece together. That's the perspective the director wants you to have.
What we do know is that at some point his condition got too bad for Anne to handle, and that he wasn't getting on with the caretakers, and so she does make that decision to put him in a permanent care facility, right, nursing home. And at that point, she would have told him, "I'm going to Paris." That much we do know, right? So his memories of her Anne telling him at earlier points in his life are probably false. They're probably he's taking events.
He's misplacing it.
Yeah. And he's recalling him in the wrong portion of his life. Yeah.
For the sake of, I don't know, just exploration, you want to try to piece together what happened a little bit more concretely. And I think we're probably going to have to end up with 2 or 3 interpretations, really. But I think it would just be a fun exercise to try and piece this together.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it starts at that doctor scene, I think. Anne is concerned about her father, and I think maybe that's when he's getting diagnosed, or like not diagnosed, but being told like, hey, it's progressed quite a bit. You're going to need some help. And then we have probably the Angela, the original caretaker, quitting, and Anne coming in, because that scene does take place, at least from what we see, in Antony's flat. So I think while Angela was caretaking for Antony, he was actually still in his flat. Is when she quit that Anne was like, all right, for now you're going to have to come live with me. So that's when he would have moved in with Anne.
And is Anne still with her husband at this point?
No, I think she's been like James, right? Was his name? I think they've been just divorced overall. And she's been with Paul this entire time.
Okay.
Interesting.
And I don't think, because even the other husband that we see, Sherlock's brother, I should just say his actual name, something Gaddis.
Yeah, Mark Gaddis.
Yeah, Mark Gaddis. I think he is just another version of Paul. Like Antony's just confusing Paul, the actual Paul, with the caretaker at the nursing home, just like he confuses Anne with the caretaker at the nursing home. So, he's at Anne's place, and we go through this one day where... No, we go through 2 days there, in my opinion. The one with the chicken, where they're going to have chicken for dinner that night. And the other day where Laura, Imogen Poots, is going to potentially be the new caretaker. Those are the 2 days that we see. Actually, I'm not sure now, because I feel like at dinner, Anne is asking her father, like, hey, how was it with the caretaker? Oh, no. That would have been his first day with the caretaker. Like post meeting her, I think.
Yeah, so essentially what you're saying is that in one day she, the caretaker comes to meet meet Antony and kind of figure out if she's going to take the job. They have chicken for dinner that night, and then she comes back the next morning to pretty much start her service, right?
Yep.
And you're saying everything else in his flat happens within those 2 days?
Pretty much 2 or 3 days, yeah.
Okay.
No, not 2. At least 3, maybe 4 days.
I think it would be disingenuous to say those are consecutive days, though, right? It seems like a lot.
Exactly. I'm not saying. Yeah, it's not maybe like.
Sure.
Laura could have come in 1 week and she was starting the week later, and we just see that day the week later. Like we don't see the time in between.
Right, and then also at the same time, the day in his flat, that could have been months before the day that we experience in Anne's home, right?
Yeah, in fact, that is my assumption. That it would have happened at least like, minimum like couple weeks, maybe 2 to 5 weeks or something have already passed since Angela has quit, because Anne is not like acting like she has just started taking care of her father at her place. It's clear that she's been like handling this for a while now. And same with the conversations that we see with Paul and Anne. Like it's something that they've been dealing with for quite a while, and that's why the need for change is so...
There was one line a little bit earlier on that I think I just kind of, because of the context, I assumed it to be truth, where Anne says something along the lines of, remember, Dad, when you broke your hip right after right after you got into that fight with Angela, and then you had to move in with me. She says something like very quickly to that effect, and it goes uncontested, essentially, meaning of all the things in this movie that Anthony objects to and says, wait, did that happen? I don't remember that happening. That's not how it happened. That one, he doesn't say anything, and it kind of gets glossed over, right? And so I think that was kind of just a little nugget of truth, right? Which, because, most of the things in this film, he questions them one way or the other. So like, if there's any doubt, he was probably shouting about it because he's so disoriented. So I kind of assumed that the fact that he broke his hip at some point and he had to move in with her, and that was the context in which they end up from his flat to Anne's flat, right? That which we see as kind of one fluid movement, right? We don't even get to I barely can tell those two locations apart in my head, you know what I mean? So from our perspective, it's all one place, but clearly there was an incident that caused them to move, right? And so I think that is probably what happened, which means by the time he's kind of recovered, which is what we're seeing, where he's like walking around and he's fine, it's probably been a very long time since he's moved in. And at the same time, and it's so difficult to talk about because multiple actors play the same characters in this movie, but Anne's husband is also very irritated at the fact that Anthony is staying with them, and it seems like it's kind of built up over time because of how long Anthony's been there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Like it's taken a toll on their relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think that's the cause of the divorce, that Anne and her husband are together, and Anthony's stay in their home, in their flat, causes the divorce. Because there's that scene where Paul is, it seems like he's either talking down to him or he's slapping him, right? You can't trust what's actually shown, but there's a possibility he slaps him, and then Anne sees that, and then that was the cause of the divorce.
Yeah,
that's one interpretation.
And this is interesting, though, because I think you have decided that the husband we're seeing is Anne's husband prior to her divorce, right? At the same time, they refer to him as Paul a lot in the movie, which would be her new boyfriend who she's going to move to Paris with, right? Uh-huh. I think the reality is we don't know which one it is. And that makes a huge difference for the chronology, because if it is James, who I think is supposed to be her ex-husband, that means that incident happened quite a long time ago. And eventually led to their separation. Then she was probably by herself for, 5 years or more, because it seems like, at least Anthony mentions, I haven't seen you with anybody since and I can't remember his name. What's his name? James, right? And again, now we're also assuming that he remembered the name correctly, but.
And then there's all those incidences where he's questioning the nature of Anne's marriage, right? Oh, right. Are you divorced? Are you not? So that gives me pause to think that this does happen over a long period of time.
Which means that, he was in that state of, his dementia had been getting worse for years. And then finally, she has a new boyfriend. She says she's moving to Paris, and she decides to put him in a nursing home before she leaves, right? That's one interpretation. On the other hand, if you think the husband that we're watching, in this film is Paul, her new boyfriend, then that's a completely different interpretation. That means that, he moved in and, they were trying to figure something out. And then eventually they decided, no, we have to move to Paris because, we just need to have our own life or something. You know what I mean? So that would totally flip-flop the order of events in terms of what we're talking about here. I find that fascinating, that either one technically could work as far as what we've seen.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, just another point. We get two scenes at the nursing home, like the one where Anne is dropping her father off, and the other one where Anthony, a very heartbreaking scene, at the very end when he's not even remembering who he is himself. We get only just those two scenes, as if it's just been one night at the home or at the nursing home. But through the conversation, we know that it's been months that he's been there, because the caretaker tells him well, your daughter comes, ever so often on the weekends to visit you. She sends you postcards. So Anne's been in Paris for a while, but we just get we pretty much get from our viewing perspective that it's only been one night. And, for Anthony, that's all it's been. It's he just woke up and he's in a new place and he doesn't know where he is. He thinks he's still in his flat. But yeah, I mean, I guess I want to kind of get into the themes at this point because I gave it 100. I think one commonality between this and all the other Oscar nominated movies, I gave them pretty high scores for the themes. And I mean, like I have no idea how you could go low on this. This movie, like the execution.
But sticking with themes, right? What concretely can you point to and be like, hey, that's a theme that, I don't know.
So for me, look, it's one major theme that's a universal experience is of aging. And this film probably captures a very tough situation when it comes to aging. It's not like your standard normal one, but it's not just capturing it well, it's conveying it like very cleanly and respectfully, and it's scary at the same time. It's very touching, like it says, heartbreaking, but it's also like very real, and that also just obviously goes to my acting score too, because the performances were also so great. But you know, then we have some random symbols, not random, but we have very like deliberate symbols that are presented to us, like the watch, right? We keep talking about it, but that's a very clear symbol for what it means for Anthony. It's like his one way of knowing, you know, knowing what the time is, helps place him in his world.
It's his solid rock, right, that he can rely on.
Exactly. Like it's the one constant that he has. If he doesn't have his watch, he doesn't know what time it is. He's completely at a loss. Like he doesn't know what day it is at that point. He doesn't know what time of the day it is. Like we have those scenes where he thinks that it's morning and he's just had breakfast, but it's time for dinner already, right? So, and he doesn't have his watch in that scene, and he's wondering, like, you know, I mean, it's, and then it's wrapped up very nicely too at the end. I think at the nursing home, we have the scene with the caretaker after Anthony has his breakdown where he's like crying for his mother. She tells him like, hey, look, it's sunny outside right now. Let's go outside for a walk. When you feel better, you know, we'll come back, we'll have some food, and we'll go out again because it's sunny, right? It doesn't stay sunny long here because obviously it's in England, right? So the whole point is, while it's nice, take advantage of it. Like while I guess you have your memory, your health, your life, take advantage of it because it doesn't last that long. Like that's just the overall message that we're getting from this movie. And it's like the last part of the movie. It's like literally the last like quotes.
Yeah,
it is the last quote because then they pan out to the leaves outside and it goes to credits. So the underlying message is like that last line in the movie.
Look, I'm not solid on that. My score of giving 80 to themes, and let me explain a little bit. This is another case where the themes is the movie, right? And the movie is the themes. I define themes in this movie this way. It's about the fragility of memory and self-identity, and the whole movie is just an exploration of how important that is to people to function, right?
Really, like you both have just articulated, the narrative kind of carries the take home message, right? So like we're almost double scoring it if we're only looking at that. But I think there's a lot more that we do look at here, and we should point that out, right? We're looking for, as Faraz mentioned, we're looking for symbols. We're also looking for motifs. We're looking for political or social commentary, anything abstract, really, right? We're looking for those types of things. So although the overall kind of central theme is the fragility of memory and of life, right? There's a lot of different elements they use to bring that out, right? And the watch is a great one because you know that the watch doesn't really help him figure out what day it is or what year of his life he's in, right? It's just a mental thing, and it gives you some nice dialogue as well, right? Because he keeps saying that, like, how am I going to keep track of time if I don't have my watch, right? And the reality is his whole life is a struggle of trying to keep track of what happened when, right? So it's more symbolic than anything there, right? But also, like, there's so many layers to how they show us how fragile things are. Right. So Faraz, you mentioned that quote at the end about how, you got to take advantage of the sunny days while you have them, right? That operates on multiple levels, right? So first is the level about, here's your lesson on life, take advantage of your good years, right? At the second level, though, it's about somebody in his condition and how you hear this about dementia all the time. Some days they remember who their kids are and who their husband was and all of that. And on other days, they just can't recall it, right? So
and other days they can't even function. Like,
right.
There's very good days and very bad days. And yeah, that's what you're
and we see that here too, right? Because there's whole days that he doesn't remember. So that one scene where he's still wearing his his pajamas, and Anne is telling him that it's it's 8 p.m. time for dinner, and he's like, well, I thought it was 8 a.m. So some days are sunny and some days are not, right? And so there's days where he's going to remember more about his condition, and those are the good days, right? And there's some days where he's not going to be able to remember who his daughter is or what she looks like, and those are the cloudy days, essentially, right? So that some of that dialogue really operates on multiple levels, and I think that's they couch things in really nicely, and it's not surprising because I think dialogue is obviously focused on more when you're talking about somebody writing a play. And so being able to borrow a lot of that, you knew that the writing was going to be good. So I'm not surprised that they were able to work in things like that. But I think there's a lot of value there. So, just thinking about themes in like all the different ways it's presented, I think it's really good here.
I totally agree. And at one point about writing in the play, if there is one way you can kind of tell that this might be from a play, is because of the writing. It's just super deliberate almost, and very concise. And we can kind of tell just by how short this film is, like how much they're able to convey through their dialogue in such a short time frame. And I think that's something that's something that a play is written for usually.
Right. Yeah. Like it's typical in a play to have some major events that you never get to see unfold, but you hear them referenced over and over, and you get to fill in the details that way. So we never meet Angela, his prior caretaker. We just hear so many times about what happened with Angela and how he treated her. And so you have to fill in those details. And that's because that's just like, that's a scene that as when you're building a play, you're just like, okay, we're not going to bother showing that. We don't have that luxury. We'll just tell the audience about it and they'll learn that way. Right. So there's so many things like that, I think, in this movie where, you have to piece together what happened off screen based on the dialogue. And so, yeah, that's emblematic of a play, I think. Right.
Yeah. So
the last thing I'll say on themes, I think, is this is a film where kind of the things that they are showing you thematically, it's done in a manner that is better than one could explain in words, I think. Like when and we talk about this a lot in terms of like what is the purpose of film, right? And I think for example, me and Farhan have discussed this a couple times in terms of what we expect and what we want from a film. It's so different because some people are looking for like real art, and some people are looking for meaning, and there's all these different ways you can look at it. And I definitely fall in the second camp. I'm looking for like some solid meaning, something you're conveying here. Like I just do not know that I've ever seen the condition of a person with dementia depicted in a better way, like in any sort of media. Like I just don't think that anyone can understand what it's like to have dementia better than by watching this film. Like I even just trying to explain to you what they showed and how they showed it in this movie, I can't do it as well as they did it on screen. And so that tells me like this film really just has value. It shows you something that you can't learn another way. I mean, no matter how many times I've learned about what dementia is, I didn't ever see it like this, and it is terrifying to see it in this fashion. And I think it's. I mean, I have no way of knowing this, right? None of us do until you have it, and then it's too late. But to know whether it's accurate what they're depicting, but the terror of not being able to remember what your daughter looks like and misplacing a face from somewhere else, and like those types of things were just, I mean, they were phenomenally showed. I can't get over the fact that I don't want to ramble on, but the idea is that I don't think there's another way to show this, and that tells me that like thematically this movie has to be very strong. So I mean, I docked it 5 points for something. I have to look back at my notes to figure out why I gave it a 95 and Faraz gave it 100. But really, like that's what adds value to a film for me in terms of meaning. So that's why I scored it up.
Fahad, you talked about how like your day was just like dampened down after watching this movie.
Yeah.
Like that scene with Anthony Hopkins at the end, man, when
Oh,
he breaks
yeah.
down, it's just, again, it's heartbreaking. I mean, his performance is incredible, and just the terror in his voice, and just how horrifying it is as a viewer seeing that. And it's just like, again, we have no idea what it's like. The perspective we get, I agree with Yusuf. I don't know if I've ever seen anything where conveying what dementia is like, came through to me as much as it did in this film.
Yeah. There is a parallel with another movie I saw. I don't know if I have this right, if I'm confusing it with another movie. I think it was Babadook. And it's not about dementia, but it's about a mother's, I think, either postpartum depression or something else. There's some condition going on, and it just slowly builds up. But it's a forced perspective. It's similar to this, where it's like you follow this one character and you see strange things happen, and you question the nature of reality. And it's also a horror movie, and also like there's some deeper meaning behind it. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. Babadook is actually about I think just grief in general, like losing a family member, losing a husband,
Is that
or something
what it was?
like that, right? Yeah, so it's focusing on that. But you're exactly right, because they personify that that feeling, that emotion, right? So and it's you're right. It's very similar in terms of the way that they use a horror background to kind of trick you into thinking about deeper things, right? And I think that's what I enjoyed about this film as well, because I think the way that they used, we should talk about the aesthetics more, but the way that they used all of the cinematography and the sound to really make you feel like you were watching like a thriller, and like there was these eerie moments. That's what really put you in the headspace of somebody who's going through that, because that's what it really is like from their perspective, right? So Babadook, very similar in the same fashion.
Yeah, so I mean, let's talk about those aesthetics. Yusuf, the word you use, eerie, that's exactly how I would describe the music. I mean, the opera music, it's fitting, like in the context of that's what Anthony likes to listen to, and that's the music we watch him listening to. But it also plays in scenes where one scene that's coming to mind right now is when, after Anne has dropped Anthony off at the hospital and she's leaving the hospital, and you have like the orchestra blaring as she's walking out, and it's just eerie. And then you have those other scenes where, again, we're not sure what we're seeing, because we don't know what's happening because it's Anthony's perspective. When he hears the door open and close, and he's like, who's here? And he like grabs like a fork, right? And it's happens to be Paul, who's sitting in the living room drinking wine. But it's like the other Paul. Mm-hmm. It's not the one that he remembers. He recalls a different one. So like that's where it gets like spooky almost, right? It's like, what's going on here? Aesthetically, I went really high because of the sound. I really enjoyed the score here. I really thought the visual effects were super important as well. Just the staging in general. We mentioned this, how there's subtle changes throughout the entire film. Like, there's a 2-person couch in this spot at one scene. Next scene is just a single-person couch. You have the painting when it's there, when it's not there. When you're in Anthony's apartment and you have like that chessboard next to the couch, and then when you're in Anne's, you don't. The lighting fixtures are different. The floors are different. The kitchen is different. I mean, it just goes back and forth, and it plays with you so many times that, I mean, and obviously it's all deliberate. And I'm sure if you were to like really like watch it and take notes and like place it within Anthony's mind versus like what's, I guess, objectively real, the reality, you probably could do it. Like, I'm sure it's delivered to that level. Like, I have no doubt about it. But like, because it's done so well and it's so purposeful, and it's distracting in a good way. Again, because it's making you question your own self. Like, what are you seeing here? That's why I'm so high on the aesthetics.
Yeah, I mean, it really disorients you. And I mean, the details you're talking about, they're details that they don't use. You know what I mean? They don't use them for any purpose other than just to disorient you. You know what I mean? And it's stuff that you would never notice otherwise, because they're not going to bring it up in any meaningful fashion for pushing the plot or anything like that. Like, the backsplash tiles happen to change suddenly, right? And why would you notice that, right? But once you do notice it, you're like, wait, what the hell's going on? And so you could really rewatch this movie just to get the value of that. I think even the bag that Anne brings the chicken home in is like a different bag a couple times, right? So like, why? Like
it's like a blue bag with Anne, and it's like a paper bag with the other Anne, the caretaker Anne.
Right.
Like, yeah, it's creepy and eerie, man. It's like, what the hell?
Yeah, I mean, and so those are scenes where you're already so jarred because when Catherine, I think it is, right? Catherine is the nurse, right, at the nursing home, but she gets superimposed into Anthony's memories of being in Anne's home, right? So she walks in and she says she's Anne, and he's like, who the hell are you? So like you wouldn't look at the bag in that moment, right? Because there's so much else going on. But I love those little details. And I mean, I always thought if there's those little details that just adds a second, adds value on a second watch, basically. I love stuff like that because that means they're really thinking about like the holistic perspective here. And so, yeah, there's so much of that in this movie.
The details are switched on you just so you as an audience, you're never comfortable in trying to piece together what exactly is happening. It's that forced perspective dementia.
I think that they do the same thing with the editing of this movie. And so the editor, whose name is Yorgos Lamprinos, I guess. That's as close as I'm going to get. But the way that he puts this editing together, it's just, like we talked about, it's so fluid between probably the 3 or 4 days over which all the events in this movie occur. It's so fluid as he moves between those days, right? Some of them happening, mid-scene. And at the same time, like we discussed already, also, you can repiece this together in a lot of different ways and try to make some, reasonable sense of it. And that is a testament to like the good editing, right? Because he's chosen his takes very carefully in order to give you that effect, leave it confusing, but also leave enough, in there that you could try to reason your way through it. And, you'd probably come up with a lot of question marks nonetheless. But it's perfectly done in order to keep you in the frame of mind of Antony.
I can't recommend this movie enough in terms of what you were talking about earlier just now, Yusuf, about, what people look for in a movie. This like has that balance of entertainment and art that hits it for me. Like it's there. Like there's so much technical aspects of this film that's so impressive. And then there's just the enjoyment of what you're watching. I'm not saying that you're going to be like happy watching it, but like how it connects with you, how it conveys like relationships and like a tough situation, like at a very basic level. Like it's just super well done.
I would agree. I was also going to mention, or I wanted Fahad to discuss Ludovico Einaudi. Einaudi, I think I said his name.
It's kind of hard to do it, right? Because there's that major score that they keep repeating that Anthony's listening to, and then I don't know if I correctly assume like, okay, this music is Ludovico, or are we listening to the score that Anthony's listening to, like different portion of it? So it's tough for me to talk about the music, but generally I love Ludovico's music, standalone or whether it's in a movie.
Yeah, I wasn't totally sure on that, but I think the music that stuck with me the most, or the sound elements generally, was that eerie tone that they used over and over, and it's like kind of like a scratching like little like sound clip where there's just, you can feel the gears turning and the level of skepticism kind of rising, and so they dropped that in there every time something kind of went awry, right? Something happened that Antony didn't feel right about, you know what I mean? And so I assume that is really the most of that stuff is coming from the composer, right? Okay. And so I was impressed with that, I think, because it fit the space of this movie, the headspace, just perfectly. I mean, I think all we've been talking about in terms of making you feel what Antony's feeling, you're heavily relying on that, because you have to kind of feel his panic, you know what I mean? So I think that's that's why I felt really, strong about that. And it's worth pointing out, by the way, he also did the score for Nomadland. I don't know if he didn't get a nomination for either one, and it may be like a technical thing where, I don't know, maybe it wasn't original enough, perhaps. I don't know.
For Nomadland, his music was featured in it. Like, he didn't like do the music for it. For The Father, he actually composed music for it.
Okay, I see.
Right.
And I mean, I don't know enough about this guy or anything, but in general, I thought the music was very fitting, and exactly for the reasons that Yusuf just mentioned.
Yeah, they added to that whole eerie component going on, the
Yeah.
horror.
Okay, so in a movie that we're this positive, let's do some like, let's be overly harsh, I guess, right? like if you had to nitpick at some things in this film that you didn't like, what would you point out that you didn't like? And I, understanding that we obviously are all pretty positive on it.
It would be that the story, the plot, right? We get a sense of what's going on in this movie, what this movie is going to be about. If you were to improve it, you could have something more revelatory at the end. Where there's an additional piece of information revealed at the end, or we get some firm indication that this happened, right? These are the order of events.
Oh, so we have some closure for ourselves. Yeah. I mean, I guess I want that, but would that make it a better movie? I don't know. Mm-hmm. Like, me wanting that, I think is a good thing. Like, leaving me with that, want.
Sure.
Yeah.
I could see it either way, I guess, because to a degree, it would be nice to know what happens, and I think it would not ruin the flow of the movie, because at the end of the movie, when he's in the nursing home with Catherine, this is one of the good days, right? He's actually processing what he's being told, and he's understanding. He's lucid. So like him getting an explanation in that setting and being able to understand what actually happened, if there's some sort of reveal, I think that would have been okay. Oddly enough, I think I'm still satisfied with the way that it does play out, where they just leave a bunch of question marks, because I think there's so much to play with there, to try and understand, the order of events. Like we said, we're still not even 100% about, whether the husband we're watching is her new boyfriend, or if it actually was her ex-husband, or what. So it's like, it's interesting enough, I think, in the format that it's in.
Yeah, I guess I could say I wish the narrative was a little tighter around that, because the boyfriend thing, I guess, like, whether Paul and James, like, I don't know, like, I'm very confused about that still. But at the same time, man, like I get why they're doing it, and I actually appreciate that more than them just like making the narrative tighter for me.
Right. The confusion was a function of not only the narrative, but also the themes, and everything else, right? So you can kind of justify it in that way.
I wish they just found a cure for dementia and he got cured. That's what I wish.
I think for me, I thought and we didn't really talk about writing in this movie. The writing is very clever. The way that they come back to the same events, and they say the same thing so many times, right? You mentioned the way that he keeps mentioning how they don't even speak English in Paris, right? And of course the watch and the chicken dinner, Lucy and what she does, and whether she's okay, or why she doesn't come to see them. The caretaker Laura, right? She says a lot of repetitive things too, which then the nurse at the end of the movie is saying the exact same thing. So you start wondering what's coming from where. The writing is very clever in order to just repetitively keep hammering you with these things and create those parallels within the plot itself. So you start, it feels a little bit like wormholes, because once somebody drops a line, then you think, okay, where was that mentioned before, and are we confusing this with that? Yeah. Right? It builds these random bridges between different parts of the movie. So I thought that was very clever. I did think some of the writing, though, and this is me being very picky, obviously, was a little bit underdeveloped. I think one scene where it really bothered me, and I didn't know whether to put this on the acting or the writing, but it was in that final scene in the nursing home, where Anthony is basically breaking down, and he essentially looks up at Catherine and says, "I want my mommy." I was like, it was a little bit awkward in that scene, because I think it's difficult to deliver dialogue like that with any semblance of
Seriousness?
seriousness.
Sure.
Yeah. So it came off as a little bit weird and a little bit, I don't know, cliche, I guess. So there was little moments like that I think they could have cleaned up a little bit. And like I said, I put that on the writing, but I probably could have equally put it on the acting. In my opinion, though, Anthony Hopkins was just put in a couple awkward positions in terms of the dialogue he had to deliver. So this is me being extremely picky on a movie that I really like.
Oh man, one scene with Anthony Hopkins is killing it as well. Well, I guess you're saying this one he didn't kill it. I thought he did. In any case, another scene that I think he did kill it is when he first meets Laura and he's like, this jolly older guy talking about like, how he was as a younger man. And then his tone quickly changes and he's just like, he's destroying his own daughter in front of Laura and just, oh man, that was like, that's where it kind of felt like a horror movie almost, like just scary and like, oh, incredible performance. Because as another thing from dementia a lot of people forget is mood swings is something that happens a lot to people who are suffering from dementia. For obvious reasons.
I don't think it's that obvious. I mean, I think once you watch this movie, it's very obvious, and that's what I like. You know what I mean? Like I never realized that, but when you see the flow of things from his perspective, his
probably his level of frustration, right, with not knowing what's going on,
and like paranoia.
Yeah. When you see like the sequence of events that occurs in a short amount of time for him, then you understand why a mood swing would be a symptom of dementia. And it's not really just a mood swing. A mood swing is like, to me, when somebody's mood shifts quickly for no reason. So you could describe it like that in one sense, right? But there's more explanation to it than that in this case now, right? Because you get to see that really there is something that's triggering them, right? It's not just like a mood swing out of nowhere. Something is setting them off, and it's something that only they can really understand and see. There were so many moments where like I almost wish, like, I was kind of imagining in my head, like, if I was to try to explain to Anne what Anthony was going through and why he's saying what he's saying, could I do it? I don't think I could, even with words.
Gonna say that this movie kind of equips you to be more empathetic with a person that's possibly suffering from dementia, right? It gives you the understanding. It gives you can understand where their mood swing is coming from.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, it's not like you're gonna sit here and like blame him for his condition or his behavior.
His daughter never does, right? We never see a scene where she's mad or she's directing anger at him.
Yeah, frustrated for sure, but not angry.
Right.
Yeah, and I think we're not even discussing as much from Anne's perspective what she goes through. And Olivia Coleman, who admittedly I like her a lot, but I think she just does a really good job of smiling in a way that lets you know that there's like a lot of pain underneath. And so you can see her trying to maintain whatever semblance of life her dad has, and not being able to do that. And you don't blame her when she kind of gives up and puts him in a nursing home and tries to have her own life. You can understand that as well. I think so. They did a good job, which we didn't discuss as much, of showing how difficult it is from her perspective, right? When she is trying to keep her dad's life together.
Yeah.
Overall, man, this movie just made me really think about like all of our parents and kind of just elderly people and like what they go through. It was difficult to watch. I mean, all these types of things, you can't really like they discuss at the end, I guess, like it becomes more and more difficult to enjoy those years, and you can only enjoy them in short bursts. When you're able to kind of handle your condition for short stretches of time.
Definitely, I'm sure a lot of us were thinking about like our own situation, or again, it's the universal concept of aging, and like it's a horrifying look at it from this perspective, but like it's something that we can all relate to in some way, and that's why I think it makes it that much more of a touching film.
I think you're right. I mean, the other scene that came to my head was the second time she tells him that she's leaving for Paris, and he just kind of says like, well, what about me? You're gonna leave me all alone. Again, Anthony Hopkins' acting is what delivers that film. I think the writing is actually fairly, I don't want to say it's simple, but it's not overly complex, but he just delivered it so well, and it really does hit. I mean, I like it, there's a lot of pain in that scene on both sides. So
yeah, the pain where like he also thinks he's been told that she's not leaving, and he's confusing it, right? And he's like, wait, I thought you told me you're not, but what happened to this? wait, you're just gonna leave me? I'm gonna be yeah, man. It's just
the more I think about it, it's actually, I mean, that is the tragedy of dementia. It's like these sad moments, or these discrete events that happen in life that are, obviously tragic, right? Whether it is losing a daughter, as Anthony does, right? Or Anthony does. Whether it's, just not being able to have your independence anymore, your daughter moving away, all of these things, right? He has to relive them over and over and over and over. And, those are things that with time, it becomes easier to handle them and overcome them. But he can't do that because he has to relive them every single day or every single, week. I think that was something that I hadn't thought about, just how hard it is to deal with tragic events when you have to keep reliving them or reliving the news of them, right?
Exactly. So we have like Anne who is never reminding him, what happened to her sister. She just like bites her tongue whenever he mentions her.
Well,
like, oh, she just doesn't come visit me, and Anne just doesn't say anything because she knows, like, well, I don't want him to go through the grief of knowing that she passed away.
But she probably does have to explain that she's away, she's abroad or something, making up an excuse, something neat.
Maybe,
right?
But like we don't from what we see, she just keeps her mouth shut and she says, like, lets him think whatever he wants to think, right? And then just goes on about her day, and hoping that that moment will pass in his mind and they'll go on to something else.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the discussion, so hopefully you've already seen the movie. But if you've listened all the way through here and haven't seen it yet, watch it. And in fact, I probably am gonna watch this one again. It's rare for me to watch like a movie 2 or 3 times, but like again, I think it being short helps, but it's also just that good that it's definitely worth the second
While
watch.
it's good, I think it's going to be a hard rewatch just because it is so sad.
Just because it's emotional or sad or heartbreaking, like, I don't like, it's still worth watching. I guess once you got to be ready for it. That's all.
Yeah, I think I agree. Promising Young Woman is one we discussed. Same thing. It's like, there's a little bit of a, you have to be able to stomach certain things, but it has value to it. But I think Promising Young Woman is how do I say this? I think it's less delicate with that subject matter than this movie was. I think this, like, they're so careful about it, where I almost feel like it's an education that you get out of this film, like, straight up.
Yeah, there's a sense of realism here that hits home.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, I think this movie shows you the thing that it's going to show you in a way that other things cannot show you that same thing. And I don't know if I can say that about, other films that are, thematically strong. I don't think I could say the same thing. So it's almost like, yeah, this one you just have to stomach it and watch it, because I just think it's a good lesson for everyone. I'm not sure how you can recreate it. Oscar favorite.
You think so?
My
Best
favorite
picture?
For sure. If it was me, this is 100% better than Nomadland.
Oh yeah,
no
which
doubt.
I on the record said did not deserve to be a movie. Probably the harshest thing I've said.
That's true. You did say that. So yeah, I mean, and what I'm hoping is that the reason, this happens, right? It's all about momentum going into these award seasons. Mm-hmm. This movie came out extremely late in the cycle, so it may take a little bit more for it to gain that momentum. And now, we've got very little, margin here, right? And this episode is actually probably going to air after the Oscars are already out. So as a listener, you may already know what happened, but I'm just hoping that it's peaking a little bit later than Nomadland and say a few of the other films, and it's gonna get there in terms of the momentum. So that's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, the fact that it was only available after the Golden Globes, I mean, at least for us here in North America, kind of lame. Yeah. I mean, it probably was available in some way, but like maybe like very limited release. At least for us, like in our Chicagoland area, it only became available like 2 weekends ago, like at the very end of March. All right, guys, we're going to leave it at that. Thanks, everyone, for listening. We'll be back next week. Peace.
Thanks for listening to this production of The Twice Over. If you enjoyed this episode, consider subscribing and sharing it with a friend. Want to see what your tally is? Check out thetwiceover.com. All the movies we've done are listed there, as well as what we're watching for the current week. Follow us at The Twice Over on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, where you can leave us any suggestions, feedback, or comments. And if you're about it, you can also support us on Patreon. The music you hear on this podcast is from Amerigo Gazaway. You can find his work on Bandcamp and Spotify.